Hi, everyone. So as you can hear, I've lost my voice a little bit. I'm sorry in advance. I will do my best. And I'm here today to talk to you about using social dance and movement as a tool for mental health. I am a doctoral student in the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Oxford. And today, I hope to convince you with data and narratives and an interactive dance demonstration that we're all going to do in a little bit of the benefits of social dance and movement for mental health and why it is worth investing resources in this pursuit societally, regardless of whether you personally consider yourself a dancer of any description. And I'm particularly delighted to be here today because as a scientist, it's not often that I have the chance to tell the story not only of what I study and why it's important, but indeed of why I study what I'm studying in the first place. And I'd like to thank the Fulbright Association for inviting me here to tell two stories. My own as a dancer and a researcher, and how I have arrived at this question of social dance for mental health personally, and became convinced of the importance of studying social dance and movement as a tool for mental health, in part through my own Fulbright research. And then second is the story of the data that we already have in support of this idea, and what data there is left to collect. So I'd like to begin my own story for you in Middlebury College, Vermont, where I completed my undergraduate studies. I grew up in Minnesota, ballroom dancing. I've been partner dancing in one form or another since I was 11 years old. And when I arrived in Vermont, I began studying neuroscience and psychology, as well as swing dancing and capoeira. For those of you who don't know, capoeira is an Afro-Brazilian movement art that has elements of martial arts, dance, acrobatics, singing, dancing, physical improvisation between partners and groups to comprise a social game. You don't fight capoeira or dance capoeira, you play capoeira. It looks like this. Don't worry, this is not going to be part of the interactive dance demonstration today. Capoeira and partner dance both include nonverbal communication, moving in synchrony and harmony, physical call and response sequences, and community building. Over the past decades, capoeira has diasporaed out of Brazil and spread globally. I was lucky to have the chance over my time as an undergrad to play capoeira in Minnesota, Montreal, Brazil, and Vermont. And over the years, I began to notice that across a bunch of different demographic lines, like age and gender and socioeconomic status and physical ability and ethnicity and language and country of origin and others, that people would walk into these capoeira classes and they would walk out saying that they felt better. And as someone who was studying neuroscience, I was really struck by what seems like the universality of this better. What did that mean? If feeling better was really so broadly applicable after these capoeira classes or dance sessions, how might we quantify that better with the aim of eventually using something like capoeira or social dance as an intervention for mental health? And so for my senior work at Middlebury College, I reviewed studies relating to different aspects of capoeira, such as exercise and social bonding and moving in synchrony, and their impacts on mental health. I came to define better as anxiolytic, or reducing people's feelings of anxiety, augmenting self-efficacy, or the belief that you have the capacity to successfully complete a given task, and increasing prosocial behavior tendencies, or voluntary actions that are intended to benefit others. And as a solo researcher at that point, I spent 6 weeks in Brazil collecting data across 17 different movement sessions using validated psychological measures before and after sessions of capoeira and other control group activities. The results of that study suggested that one session of capoeira did reduce people's feelings of anxiety and did increase their feelings of self-efficacy and prosocial behavior, but so did the control group activities. Nevertheless, this was a promising initial result and my first attempt to answer how and why a social movement activity was good. After that research, I spent 2.5 years as a lab manager at the Fralin Biomedical Research Institute in Roanoke, Virginia. There, I was closely involved in the setup of a treatment study comparing social and emotional rehabilitation to treatment as usual for people with psychological trauma. And I began to develop a better understanding of the concept of individual versus social factors that impact mental health. You can think of an individual factor as, for example, how anxious you feel on a daily basis, and a social factor as, for example, how connected you feel to the people around you. And This study changed my perspective on just how important those social factors could be for mental health. Roanoke is also where I began to immerse myself more thoroughly in the Latin dance scene. And I kept hearing the same kinds of stories that I did in the capoeira and swing dancing world, namely stories like salsa got me through my divorce, or Latin dance is my therapy. And although salsa and capoeira might seem very different, they both have these core elements of social dance, interacting with a partner, mirroring, call and response, the social aspect, and the movement component. And so, drawing upon those stories and a better understanding of individual versus social contributors to mental health, I embarked upon Fulbright research with professors and colleagues in Niterói and Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. With this new understanding, I became interested in not just the changes that participants experienced from before to after a session of capoeira, but indeed longer-term changes to mental health and well-being. What happens if people instead participate in months of capoeira? Might that be more positive and longer interacting and lasting mental health benefits? I'm not sure how many of you in the audience had your Fulbright research change from what you proposed, but that did happen here. And ultimately, I ended up collaborating with 2 university professors, one who focused more on the movements and history of the institutionalization of capoeira, and the other who aimed to teach capoeira as a vehicle for their own students to educate their future students about racial, gender, and socioeconomic inequality in Brazil. So my Fulbright research therefore ultimately looked not just at capoeira for its broad psychological value, but specifically as a potentially valuable tool to teach participants to engage with conversations on cultural diversity and Black and Indigenous culture in Brazil with an anti-racist feminist lens. Specifically, I examined whether participating in a semester of capoeira with this enhanced curriculum corresponded with higher empathy scores post-semester as compared to the non-enhanced curriculum that focused primarily on its physical movements and the history of its institutionalization. My research suggested that the enhanced curriculum did have a positive impact on individuals' empathy, which looks really promising. It's early days for that research, and more will need to be conducted to examine social movement as it relates to individuals' empathy and social factors as well. Oh, and here's the paper that came out of that. And so now I'm going to switch gears, and I'm going to tell you the research story of social dance and movement for mental health, more broadly than just my own research. My doctorate specifically focuses on social dance for individuals with low mood and depression. So I'll begin by telling you about the problem that we're trying to address, and then what evidence we already have and what more there is to collect. So depression, as you can see here, is estimated to affect approximately 280 million individuals directly, which does not account for those, for example, who know and love someone with depression and are indirectly affected. It is a multifaceted mood disorder with a variety of symptoms, including disrupted social functioning, and loneliness and a lack of social support are key risk factors for depression. Social support, on the other hand, and particularly feeling accepted, cared about, and encouraged by others, are associated with positive treatment outcomes. Often, when individuals seek help from medical professionals for depression, they are offered medication, such as antidepressants or talking therapies. However, it's broadly understood that existing approaches to the treatment of depression and related mood disorders are imperfect and often under-resourced. And also, what works for one person might not work necessarily for someone else. And so researchers are interested in how we can improve treatment outcomes for depression. And so why are we specifically interested in social dance and movement for mental health? Beyond the reasons you've heard in my own story, namely that people from many different walks of life kept anecdotally telling me that social movement improved their mental health, from a scientific perspective, it's because social dance includes many components that we already know independently correspond to improved mental health. For example, we know that exercise has a beneficial impact, and we know that interventions that encourage people to be more active can also help with their mental health. The same can be said for activities that make people feel socially connected. These other mechanisms are already evidenced. But what's so interesting about social dance specifically is that it brings it all together. And so we can think of social dance as a combined pill that delivers social connection and physical activity and these other good things simultaneously. Beyond that, community-based social dance as a mental health intervention compared to other existing forms of treatment is compelling for a number of reasons, including cost-effectiveness and non-invasiveness, and scalability and accessibility and hopefully enjoyment and acceptability to participants. As scientists, we're also interested in the key elements of social dance that contribute to people having better mental health if they practice it. Is the mechanism by which people are feeling better, that they're, for example, less socially isolated? Is it due to exercise? Is it maybe feeling more creative or more engaged in society? A combination? Which processes are key? As scientists, when people say that these social movement activities are good for their mental health, our first task is unpicking what do they mean by good. And the second task is why, unpicking the mechanism of what better means. And if we get these right, we can start building the database of why social dance and movement could be particularly useful for mental health. But it's actually really hard as scientists to understand how big of an effect dance has. For example, we can't do a typical clinical trial where one group of our participants doesn't know that they are participating in social dance for obvious reasons. Recently, this meta-analysis was published, which is to say the research team amassed many studies comparing different approaches to the treatment of depression, and in this case, compared to an active control group, which is something like treatment as usual. What you can see here with that blue arrow is that of all of the different approaches, dance has the largest effect size, which looks pretty good upon first glance. But this can't be quite right. It's a much bigger effect size than we would expect a treatment modality to have. The authors of this paper say the small number of studies, only 5 in total, low number of participants, and biases in the study design prohibited them from recommending dance more strongly. They say it is important for future research to assess the generalizability of the effects to different populations using robust experimental designs. This is to say, dance is likely very useful for depression, but the real effect size is probably smaller than this. More realistically, probably somewhere around there in the pink range. However, while the uncertainty is really high, the potential for social dance and movement is quite high as well, and we just need more research to find out a more precise answer. At about the same time, my team was also conducting a literature review, specifically focusing on social dance and movement for mental health. We found much the same result, while many researchers across neuroscience and psychiatry and psychology and across the world have been very interested in this topic. Many different research methods and approaches have been used, and there is need for more standardization to be able to assess whether social dance and movement activities should be, for example, included as offerings through a public health system as an approach to preventing or treating depression. But we did find in our review that social dance-based movement activities have strong social components are likely to have particular value for depression in targeting both those social factors we talked about, so interpersonal perceptions and empathy, for example, as well as individual ones, such as anxiety and quality of life. And so, the first study of my doctorate is in direct response to the fact that the waitlist for mental health care internationally can be quite long in public health systems. And as people wait, they tend to get worse, and then they do worse once they are in treatment if they've been waiting a long time. And so in this study, we compared social dance to a waitlist control group for young people aged 18 to 24 with mild to moderate low mood. We had the help of a young people's advisory group. They were offered the opportunity to choose between Scottish Ceilidh dancing, Capoeira, connection games, and salsa, and they chose salsa, which was fortuitous for me as someone who teaches salsa dancing. And we offered these young people 8 weeks of salsa class and took measurements using standardized psychological measures before, during, after, and following the intervention, and then compared to that data to those of the individuals who did not participate in the salsa classes. Data analysis is still underway for this study, but in this preliminary result, you can see that there is a reduction in depression scores from before to after the study, and more so in individuals who participated in the salsa classes. In that graph on the right, you can see that people who started with higher depression scores experienced more of a decrease in depression scores over the course of the study compared to those who started with lower depression scores, which is interesting and merits more exploration. And for the next study of my PhD, we're rolling this out to clinical populations in real life. So we're going to give patients in the UK, this public health care system, the ability to participate in salsa classes as they are beginning treatment for depression to see if they find these classes to be helpful. This is a crucial step in the research process to see if individuals who are in this demographic think that social dance is helping them. Do they keep going to the classes? One of the first things we're asking as we translate this research is if we invite 100 people, how many people want to do it and how many people stick to it? And that's a really important question when you're developing an intervention. And if these people do find it helpful, we then apply to conduct a larger randomized control trial to see if social dance plus treatment as usual is more efficacious compared to treatment as usual or indeed if social dance and movement could be used as a primary approach to the treatment of depression. Part of the goal of this project is to identify whether there is a subgroup of the population that would benefit from this. As with many treatments for depression, some people will likely benefit more from something like this than others, whereas perhaps others would benefit more from a different form of social movement activity, such as group weightlifting or yoga classes. The goal is to determine whether it would be helpful someday for doctors to not only be able to prescribe medication and talking therapies, but also something like social movement or something similar that could be offered maybe even as a first-line preventative measure. All right, so we're going to take a brief intermission from my talk to see for ourselves, and I'm going to invite my dance partner and sister Clara up here. And I'm going to invite you all to stand up, and we're going to do a little tester, and then we'll come back and we'll see if you feel better. Okay, so what we're going to do is just, if you'll turn to the person next to you, when you think about salsa, it's got all of those components we talked about. And so we're going to do 3 exercises that break down the components of salsa. I see you guys ready to go with salsa already. Fantastic. Thank you for being enthusiastic. The first one is just going to be a mirroring exercise. So one person is going to be the person who's leading, and one person is going to be the person who's following. I'm going to lead. Clara's going to follow. It doesn't matter who's who. But for now, we're just going to pretend to be a mirror. So what I want you to do is just mirror the other person. Try different things. See what you can get away with doing. When you're ready, go for it. And then when you've done this, switch who's leading and who's following. They're such cuties. I'm so glad they all stood up. Okay, excellent. Very good. All right, and now that we're all up, it's time to learn some of the footwork of salsa. So if I can have you guys, can we come forward a little bit? Is that okay? Basically, in these aisles between these tables, we're going to learn the footwork to salsa. So I'm going to teach you a couple of basic steps, then we're going to put on some music, and then we're going to connect that with a partner. So we can consider this the exercise part. Don't worry, it's going to be brief. So what I'm going to have you do is start, oh my gosh, my voice. I'm going to have you start forward on your left foot. It's going to look like this. Left, back on your right, back on your left. Back on your right, forward on your left, right. So 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. Nice. 1, 2, 3, 5. You guys look great. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 1. Nice. Okay, I see we've got this. That's the basic step. Then we're going to go to the side. It's going to look like this. Starting with our left foot, we've got 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. Nice. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. You look like you were born to do this. This is wonderful. 6, 7, and 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. I'm going to teach you one more basic step. It's the back step. So this time, instead of going forward on our left foot, we're going to go back on our left foot. It's going to be 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. So back left, 2, 3, back right. Nice. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. Okay, when you've got that, we're going to open out to the side a little bit, and we're going to do some dancing with the stars' arms. Careful with the people around you. 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3. I'm happy to be in the US because normally I have to stay strictly dancing arms as opposed to dancing with the stars arms. It's nice to be home. 1, 2, 3. Nice. Okay, let's do that basic step again. 1, 2, 3, 5. Again. 1, 2, 3. To the side. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. Back. 1, 2, 3, 5. Open out. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, okay, stay right there. We're going to do some music. It's some time for music. Okay. How do I get the music? App? Spotify. Okay, ready? Forward left. 1, 2, 3. Come on, Clara, you can come up. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. Yes. Okay, one more time. And then we're gonna go to the side. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. Nice. 5, 6. If this is feeling overwhelming, small steps are your friend. Okay, back step. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2. When you're ready, you can open out with that arm. Yeah. Nice. Basic step. Nice. Great. We're going to do just a couple more, and then we're going to put this together. Okay, left. Nice. Back steps. Beautiful. All right, and open out. Nice. Beautiful. All right, I think that's perfect. Great job. All right. Okay, don't sit down, don't sit down. We're not done yet. Come on, come on, come on. All right, well, because now you've got to do it with a partner. This is social dance, so come back up. All right, this is the funniest activity I'm going to teach you. Watch first. So we've done the exercise component right there, I'd say. We've done the getting attuned to the other person. Now we're going to do the connection part. And the connection part is going to work like this. Whoever is going to lead is going to put their hands, we say teacups, like this. Whoever is following is going to put their hands like cat paws with your wrists down. And we're going to create this nice little spring connection. We're not going to do salsa yet. First, we're going to bend our knees. We're going to think about keeping our elbows in front of our bodies. And this is very silly, so suspend disbelief. We're going to think about being a spring, like this. And this is what gives us the ability to connect with our partner when we do salsa in a second. If Clara has noodle arms, it's not going to work. So let's practice being a spring. Ready? Okay, with whoever's near you. 5, 6, 7, compress, extend, compress, extend, compress, extend. Keep your elbows in front of your body. Perfect, very good. Okay, now we can do salsa. So whoever's leading, if we both start forward with our left foot, this is what happens. That's not going to work. So instead, whoever's leading is going to start forward with their left foot. Whoever's following is going to start backward with their right foot. Just the same thing, but 4 counts off. It's going to look like this. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. All right, join us. Ready? 5, 6, 7, basic. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. Nice. 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. Awesome. Okay, from here we're going to go to the side like this. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. Nice. All right, the last one is back steps. The way we do that is leaders. Whoever's leading, you're going to send your hands away from you as you step back. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Everyone keep your elbows bent for me. Yeah. 5, 6, 7. Well, okay, and then we can open up. 5, 6, 7. Yeah. All right, I'm going to put on some music so we can try this with our partners. Okay, not done yet. We're going to try it with our partners. Okay. Okay. Ready? 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3. 5, 6, 7. 1, 2. We might be on the wrong answer. Okay, when you're ready, try those side steps. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. Nice. This is my favorite. All right, get ready, back steps. 1, 2, 3. I can't actually go to the end. And when you're ready, open out. Nice. Beautiful. Basic. Nice. Perfect. Very good. Okay, thank you. You can return to your seats. We can be done dancing for now. All right, so my question for you is, Can you raise your hand for me? Will you raise your hand for me if you feel better? Okay, for those of you who did not raise your hands, please come see me afterward. I might want to put you in my study. Okay. All right, but nonetheless, I just want, hopefully, to have convinced you from this talk that we can agree that we should be in support of resourcing at least this line of study. And if I have really convinced you, and this is a cause to which you'd like to contribute, here's my email address, and/or please do come find me to chat at any point during this conference. Once again, I'm so grateful to the Fulbright Association for its contribution to this body of work and for having me here today. Thank you so much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to taking any questions that you have. Question, hello.
Yeah, so in regards to mental health, I'm an individual with mental health disability. I wonder, like, what are the research done for, like, not just individuals who have depression, but, like, also, like, other disorders, like schizophrenia, personality disorder, things like that, like bipolar and all those, like, kind of severe type of disorder. Does it work in that aspect?
Yeah, it's a really good question. That's also a field that we need more research into. But what was really interesting as we did that social dance and movement review is there are a broad spectrum of mental health disorders, that there are dance interventions that people have implemented over time. So different researchers, or maybe people who had a specific, for example, schizophrenia, and went, oh, this thing is actually really working for me. I wonder why. Maybe I'll collaborate with a researcher and figure that out. And so in terms of like statistical power, we can't, as a scientist, I'm gonna tell you that we don't have enough data yet. And as somebody who has reviewed a lot of these different kind of threads of research with different mental health disorders, I can tell you that there are people who are asking these questions. So there is definitely a body of work of.
So there's, like, resources for that, right? To help, like, patients and clients who are in, like, hospitals, in like, services, things like that, you know, especially the ones who are, like, through the local government and services, through Medicaid, things like that, that will offer these types of services for them when they're not paying out of pocket.
That's a really good question, and that's the direction that I think at least the UK's national healthcare system is going. There's this idea of social prescribing, which is the idea that if you go to the doctor with something like this, you might be offered, yes, medication and yes, talking therapy, but also yes, maybe a gardening group or something like this. So something that might be creative or nature-based or movement-based like this. So we're not quite there yet in terms of what exists as offerings. I think different governments and different systems have their own programs, so it's possible that kind of some boroughs of the world have this in that way, but certainly not in a universal way yet. And that's part of why I'm doing this research. Yes?
Thank you so much for this presentation. Is there any special training for dance instructors to, like, maximize the positive effects on mental health?
That is such a good question, especially as we're trying to roll this out to a healthcare system, because I'm not really sure what the stereotype broadly defined of something like salsa is, but there is certainly the idea of, oh no, you're doing it wrong, your arm is in this position instead of this position, and we wouldn't want that to be what people who are maybe suffering from mental health would be getting in terms of teaching. And so that is something we're talking about too, is either talking to people who already exist and are well received in the social and movement community in terms of what they are doing already and what is effective. But no, there is not, so far at this point, guidance that exists that I'm aware of for kind of how to maximize the mental health benefits as you are teaching a social and movement-based class.
Over here. Hi.
Yes, hi.
Hi, hey, my name is Bridget. I'm actually a school psychologist by credentialing.
Amazing.
So looking at your research, I felt as though I was in class all over again, especially those effect sizes. But my question to you, more like a statement and a question.
Yeah.
We incorporate a lot of social learning, social dancing with our children with autism.
Beautiful.
And I apologize, I came in late.
That's okay.
In your research, are you dealing with children or adults or both? And how does what you do, I guess, the benefits of, are you seeing the benefits of what you do?
Yeah, really great questions. So in terms of the age range, I think that this could be applicable for a broad range of ages. And indeed, beyond my research, people are studying this, from people who are as young as toddlers all the way through to people who are kind of in their 80s and 90s. And so, yes, it spans the breadth of that. Of course, there's some adaptation that is needed if you're working with people who are really elderly in terms of maybe it's chair, like sitting dance, where we're doing more of the arm movements, and for younger people, the same. So yes, it does exist. The reason that I am specifically looking at 18 to 24-year-olds is from a neuroscientific perspective. That is what we define as adolescence, which is a little bit funny. But so the reason we are specifically looking at that group is because we have a grant in my lab that is looking at specifically young people's mental health in light of loneliness and kind of the post-COVID time.
Which is good, because once they finish high school, there's typically no services for them.
Exactly. And the thing is, if you don't address these mental health difficulties when people are young, it's not like they just go away over the lifespan. But yes, also applicable, I think, for older groups. Thanks for your question. Okay, I see lots of questions. I'm going to let Munir with the microphone decide. Yeah, go for it. Oh, whoever has the microphone, please go next. Thank you.
So I'm currently studying my master's in clinical psychology.
Amazing.
So I have a question in terms of the treatment of depression. Is that
Yeah.
just in major depression? Is that also in persistent depression, or just cyclical episodes in terms of people that have depressive episodes in regard to their hypomanic episodes?
Yeah.
And such?
Thank you so much for asking that question, because that's actually a personal interest of mine, is how do we study depression? And often when you see, for example, a clinical trial of depression, these are the people who can be included, and here is the population that has depression. And the reason that only these people can be included is because they don't have any comorbidities, they don't also have anxiety, they don't also have schizophrenia or autism, something like this. And therefore we can say, yes, if something changes when we study these people, it has to do with depression. But unfortunately, that is not representative of the entire population that has depression. And so if you're someone like me who is really interested in interventions that can be broadly applicable, the way that these studies are specifically done is we take a snapshot of people's mental health before and we take a snapshot of their mental health afterward, which means in this study I can include somebody who has depression, who has been clinically diagnosed, maybe they've had multiple episodes, maybe they're in remission. But right now, when I'm including them in my study, when we take a snapshot of their mental health with these standardized measures, they currently have depression. And in 8 weeks, when we take another snapshot of their health, we can see any changes from that point. So it can be that they're taking medication for depression. It can be that they also have anxiety or something else. We have kind of some inclusion and exclusion criteria, but with these studies, I specifically was interested in the term is ecological validity, or what does it actually look like in the population when people have depression, as opposed to answering a more precise question like, do people who've had specifically 2 episodes of depression and recovered, how does this impact them, if that makes sense? Great.
Thank you so much. I think your research has the possibility of adaptation in a number of other populations, especially the elderly population.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know anything about that. But what I want to know is whether or not your effects are long-lasting, or whether you find that you need to keep introducing and continuing the social dancing.
This is such a good question, and thank you for asking it. So the answer is, what I can say to you as a researcher is we don't know yet. We don't know, because there aren't, and as far as I'm aware, I don't know any studies where they've followed up 5, 10 years later, or even necessarily 18 months later to see if the effects have perseverated. However, I think it's really, really important to do that. And part of the reason I'm interested, both as a researcher and a dancer, in something like social movement is because you hear these stories of, oh, you know, I was having a really rough time in my life. Maybe I was grieving, something happened, and all of my friends from this social dance community or capoeira community, what have you, started checking on me. Hey, I haven't seen you in class in a while. And the other thing that's different in something like this, from, for example, like you finish your course of cognitive behavioral therapy and you kind of can't just keep seeing your cognitive behavioral therapist recreationally. Something with salsa dancing is if we prescribe this as an intervention, you can't just keep going. You don't need us to tell you that you can go. And so in terms of longer term effects, I think not only once people stop their prescribed course of social movement does the effect last, but also does it change how they're living their lives? Do they start having this identity as somebody who's part of a social and dance-based community that then changes their fitness, that then changes their social connectedness? And how does that impact these longer-term changes over time? I think it's a really interesting question. Other questions?
Thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Thank you.
So I'm curious, since music is so inextricably attached to dance, and we widely understand that music has a lot of mental health benefits.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you're aware of any research that has been done that kind of isolates the impact of music as opposed to the physical and social.
For sure. That's such a good question. I know of especially one study offhand. It is a tango dancing study where, if I remember correctly, there is a group that does just the movements of tango, a group that listens to just the music of tango, and a group that does both. And I think that that is a really, I like these questions about the active ingredient. Is it the music that's driving it? Is it the dance? Is it the being in close contact with another person? Like, what is it that makes this work? And as somebody who's really interested in giving resources to people who don't have the resources otherwise, my response to that is generally, well, I'm really glad music works. I'm glad that movement works. I'm glad we know these things are effective by themselves, because then what if we take an activity that already has all of these different elements and give that to people? Hopefully that works as well, if not better, and then people can have access. Yeah.
Okay. So, all right, so you picked a specific group.
Yes.
That Jonathan Haidt recently said social media causes mental illness in adolescent girls, right? So does any of this ever combine with asking them to get off their social media? I mean, it's like you're robbing Peter to pay Paul all the time. You know, the more neuroscience we know, the more neuromarketing there is. So, you know, it's this broader context. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. I, as a human, think that in life you get to pick kind of your one or several questions that you're going to work on, how to contribute to society. And as a researcher, I have happened upon this world that yes, there is a lot of social media usage, and that has changed, you know, brains and how things work in this generation. I did not grow up with a smartphone. My younger sister definitely grew up with a smartphone. It is a different context. And as a researcher, as somebody who's interested in mental health, I take the population that I have and I see how we can help. And you know, I don't think I'm ever going to be in a position to tell people to stop using social media. I think that's unrealistic at this point, at least from my vantage. But I do think that I can offer people a tool that might be the ability to then be in person and forming connections in real life. And maybe that will help give them some of the things that maybe feel missing in their lives, if that's part of what's happening with social media. And maybe that will rebalance how they spend their time.
Hi.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for this presentation. It's very interesting. I'm very curious about how you were operationalizing your variables. You talked about trying to measure what better means.
Yeah.
So like, it seems to me that you were measuring like, or like asking people directly on surveys, like if they felt better. Were there other ways that you were measuring that?
For
based
sure.
on like observation or
Yeah.
any other methodologies?
Really good question. So because of how psychology research works, I really drew very strongly on the measures that we use in something like, for example, the NHS, the National Healthcare Service, to be able to look at quantifying changes. So for example, the primary outcome measure in my first doctoral study is the PHQ, the Patient Health Questionnaire. You might know it because when you go to the doctor, there's a checklist of things that are, you know, for example, scale of 1 to 4, how fatigued are you? How often do you have trouble sleeping? How often do you feel restless? Like, there are all of these questions that correspond, that are kind of our understanding of what depression means from a quantitative perspective. And so if I give you this survey and then I give it to you again in 4 weeks, in 8 weeks, in 12 weeks, we can look at those changes and we can compare those changes to, for example, when the population at large starts cognitive behavioral therapy in something like the NHS, where this is recorded every time you go and have counseling or start medication. You have to fill out these questionnaires. And so using these questionnaires that already exist, it's much more of a quantitative project, because if what we're trying to do is suggest to a government healthcare system that this might be useful, we have to use their tools. I do think there's a lot of merit in qualitative research as well, and so I always do ask people in my studies, kind of, please tell me about your experience in this. What do you think worked well? Was this useful for you? And in fact, the NHS study that we will be running is more qualitative in its outcome measures, because then the idea is to apply for a randomized control trial using the responses to this. And the other really important thing in this whole process is, we call it PPI, it's patient and participant involvement. And as you heard me talk about, you always consult the population, if you can, when you're designing a study for them. So for example, that Young People's Advisory Group, young people with depression, we asked them, okay, do you think people in your demographic would want to do capoeira? Do you think that they would want to do salsa? Do you think maybe these gentle connection games that we were doing might be better? Why? Based on what you know as somebody with lived experience of this. And so kind of, we do span the whole gamut from kind of narrative interviewing to more quantitative measures.
We have one left time for last one.
Oh, no. I'll be up here afterward.
Although a very different population and a different disease. I'm aware recently of the work that's being done with Parkinson's.
Yes.
And the use of boxing as a very important dimension in keeping people active and engaged and with wider movements than they had previously. And the most interesting part of that is that there's a feedback loop to the brain. And so people actually change as a result of doing the boxing,
Right.
not just because it was a pleasurable experience. And I'm wondering if you're thinking about looking at that dimension as well, because I think that would just be so powerful in terms of the longevity of the change that happens.
Yes, so I definitely have neuroscience colleagues who are interested in, and I come from neuroscience, my background is neuroscience, but I'm kind of more on the social intervention side of things these days. There are people who are very interested in how exercise changes the brain and things like this, and there are definitely people, I have colleagues in Canada actually who are looking into that question right now, changes in the brain with Parkinson's. That is dance-based, but I would believe that people are doing this with boxing as well. And I think it's a really important question. I think with the limited resources that I have, specifically, I'm kind of trying to use the resources that I have to be able to impact the widest number of people. And I think while the neuroscience of the changes are really interesting, specifically if that money can otherwise be used to give people more access to being able to do something like this in the first place, that is where my research interest lies. However, I think they both complement each other and they're both really important. And also, I don't want to say that social dance is the only thing. Boxing, also great, also social movement based. It's whatever works for you. So if that's a takeaway that you have, it doesn't have to be salsa, but hopefully you enjoyed salsa today.
Thank you so much, Brennan.
Of course.
For the presentation. So,